Donald Trump's Meet the Press interview sends shockwaves for his intention to end birthright citizenship. Daniel Penny is found not guilty of manslaughter in the death of Jordan Neely. And a shocking study finds a high likelihood of causality between COVID-19 vaccines and death. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Monday, December 9th. Senator Joni Ernst had reportedly been lobbying against Donald Trump's pick for Defense Secretary and Pete Hegseth. However, she took a second meeting with Hegseth, so could she be softening her stance? Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and his long-awaited return, Chris Bedford, our senior political editor. So, Chris, in a statement today, Ernst said that she supports Pete through this process. Now, she says, I look forward to a fair hearing based on truth, not anonymous sources. So is she actually going to follow through with this change of heart?
Well, first I got to get to some important business, which is, Matt, we can't both just quit shaving. Right now, I'm on a mission now. I've been sent by my wife. She says, I don't like the short beard anymore. It's winter. But I tell you what, maybe I'll give in first because I'm not actually as big a fan. It gets a little itchy, even in the wintertime. But it's just a great day to come back. Great day to jump back into the news because we talked about this, probably talked about this on literally like the last day I was here before a surprise precipitous labor ended up with me almost having to become a midwife. This Republican Senate is really the holdout against Donald Trump. They're different from the rest of the GOP. They're different from the House. They're different from the base, for sure. They're different from a lot of where the voters are. And even though Mitch McConnell's no longer the leader, he still has a lot of power. And there's just an incredible arrogance amongst the Republican senators. People like Joni Ernst just really do believe that they're untouchable, that nothing, the most popularly elected Republican president in modern history, that she's now in charge, that she gets to pick the nominees, that she can vote for Joe Biden's completely disastrous Secretary of Defense, but she can thumb her nose at the kind of conservative populist remaking of the Department of Defense and this administration's mandate given to it by the American people. This is bad advice. The rumor around town is that a lot of this is coming from our chief of staff, who is kind of classically in the never Trump camp. I've not been able to confirm that myself. I don't know the chief of staff personally, but I've heard that from all the people who've had to work with him. And she thought she could just get away with this. And there's been an intense level of pressure on her, both from at home. Remember, she's got a campaign that she has to run for re-election in 2 years. I think she's actually probably instigated the primary challenge against her with this move. And it lines up with a lot of other squishy and not very helpful moves that she's made over the years, the not too long time that she's been in Washington, D.C. But she heard pretty quickly. There was folks all up and down the line, not just the online people, but the voters, Republican people who supported Donald Trump, in the independents who supported Donald Trump, the people who wanted change in Washington, that this was not going to be allowed. And even for people who maybe didn't think that Hegseth may have been the best choice, they ended up rallying behind him because they recognized that if the obstinate Republicans in the Mitch McConnell camp, which he very soundly is, can just sabotage whichever aspect they don't like of this new agenda, then nothing's actually going to get done. And people are really sick with people like Joni Ernst being a rubber stamp for folks like Joe Biden, and then trying to meddle and change their ways when it comes to Donald Trump. So this statement I see today, it's not quite a full-throated, I'm going to vote for him endorsement. It is a massive shift. It is damage control. You see her out there posting now pictures with Kash Patel, Donald Trump's nominee to
yes.
run the FBI. And you know that she's just hoping that she can be forgiven before anyone actually puts together a serious primary challenge to her.
Yeah, that pictures is what I was going to ask you about. First off, I commit to shaving in this new year. I need to shave more, but what happened, I need to let you know, and our audience, is that I had such a good time at the Christmas party that turned into a karaoke party
Our
Friday
Blaze
night.
Christmas party.
That
Yeah.
I'm just recovering now, and I really haven't even looked in the mirror since. It was a very good time. Lots of singers in this building, as it turns out. Speaking of pictures, we're also going to need pictures. People are going to need to see at least one baby picture if you are so willing to do so in the future, because we do need to talk about that. With Ernst, though, real quick, I mean, it is a sea change. You can see her backing off and all of a sudden taking these pictures. Does it matter that will there be consequences? Do you think? You think this anger is going to carry over? Because senators do this all the time, right? I mean, this is what they do. They anger everyone when they think they can, and they have time to do it, and then everyone forgets about it. Do you think this really has legs? What's going on here?
It's hard to tell. I mean, you've seen ever since the Tea Party days, in particular, different groups of outsiders seizing control of Republican Party apparatuses in the states. And sometimes that is successful, but a lot of times it's just a lot of people saying rah, 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 and then the hard actual work. And it does take real work. You can't just tweet an actual candidate into existence to take out a powerful sitting senator. You can't just complain at town halls until a powerful sitting senator is taken down. It takes a real ground surge. But if you are someone who's sick of her leadership in the state, you've got to be, and you're a serious person, you've got to be saying, well, this is an opportunity here to go at a sitting Republican with base backing, with Donald Trump's backing. But then again, you never know. Donald Trump is so magnanimous when you change your tune. He'll go after people all the way to the very hill when they won't change their tune on him. But you could be, I've been in the room multiple times where he's looked at someone who signed their name, for example, to a Never Trump National Review cover, for example, and he'll just laugh and say, you used to not like me, but now you like me. And that's all I care about. So you can't really count on his backing if she actually does fall in line on this issue. And a lot of this is going to depend on what Mitch McConnell is doing. The Republicans, I think, after this kind of a whipping that they've received at the hands of the base and also members of the administration, are going to be wanting to pull back. But old man Mitch McConnell is in much more in a burn it all down mood. When he accepted his Lifetime Achievement Award at the AEI dinner just last month, even though Donald Trump had just been historically reelected, he used it to attack Trump repeatedly, over and over again, in a room full of Washington, D.C. elites and donors dressed up in tuxedos. He's not going to give in here. So in order to actually try to really beat him and people who at least used to do everything he said, like Joni Ernst, there's going to need to be real consequences for McConnell and his network.
Well, let's look at Donald Trump. And we know that he's out there and talking about immigration all the time, but now he's out there talking about birthright citizenship as well. So he was interviewed with NBC's Kristen Welker and made several promises on what he plans to do. Take a look.
You promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it. We're the only country that has it.
Through an executive action?
We're the only country that has it. If somebody sets a foot, just a foot, 1 foot, you don't need to, on our land, congratulations, you are now a citizen of the United States of America. Yes, we're going to end that because it's ridiculous.
Through executive action?
Well, if we can, through executive action. I was going to do it through executive action, but then we had to fix COVID first, to be honest with you. We have to end it.
Chris, you're back. I didn't know if we were going to have birthright citizenship on the bingo card for the day that you came back, but here we are.
I kind of love it. I mean, this shows you how far the Overton window has shifted. There was a period of time where Matt and I listened to Michael Anton talk about that, who's going into administration, talked about, heard Stephen Miller talking about that, but really no one else. It wasn't something that you could bring up. Even when you talk about immigration, we saw this especially in 2016 during the Republican primary. Before you were allowed to criticize illegal narco-terrorist gangs and human smuggling operations being in control of our border, you had to sing this swan song, this beautiful ode to the founding documents of America and how we're a nation of immigrants and how this country was built by illegals from El Salvador and Guatemala, which is obviously completely not true. That they are the backbone of this country, people coming in from Somalia, people coming in from Haiti, people coming in from all over the world are the ones who are the builders of this country. Even people who are immigration hawks had to say that and do this whole hemming and hawing. And only folks, maybe the intellectual circles, were willing to say, it's a real problem, this complete change that we have in the United States on birthright citizenship. Now, I don't think that they're going to have a lot of luck doing this. I think they're going to have a very difficult time with the courts. But it should that they're willing to talk about it, that they're starting the ball on the other team's goal line as opposed to on their own, which is how Republicans usually negotiate, is a good sign for immigration hawks. Talking to senior members of the administration, as I was trying to just get back into the game over this past weekend, about how serious they are about their immigration policy, it is deadly serious. They don't want it. This is so weird for Republicans. They don't want it weighed down by tax fights. They don't want to attach it to anything. They want money in the first month of the Congress, first month of the new administration, in the billions of dollars sent for a massive operation to completely shift how immigration has been treated in this country, to do actual deportation, something that is difficult. It's going to take political stomach. The first time you see people who are unhappy about being forced to leave this country because they're here illegally, it's going to make some people quake. It's going to make the Joni Ernsts of the world very uncomfortable. But the American people have now 3 times essentially backed that aspect of Donald Trump's agenda, and it's central to his success.
So we have to the birthright citizenship thing we need to say, and yeah, I can say this as a Claremont person. Claremont was one of the only people talking about this in terms of its constitutionality, but people don't realize, and Mike Lee does. He just came out and said that interview and what she said is just false. The Constitution does not say that there's such a thing as birthright citizenship. Courts have interpreted it a certain way, but it really is remarkable that now all of a sudden Mike Lee is coming out and saying that on the one hand, and before you mentioned Anton, Michael Anton went in the Washington Post. Remember, it's 2016, I think. They're like, oh, we'll have people who are, explaining Trump write for us. And they basically had him write 2 columns, and he wrote one about birthright, and they were like, oh, actually, we can't even print this, right? We can't even print this. We don't want you writing anymore. So, talk about a sea change. We've come a long way.
Bedford, it's good to have you back, man. We're so excited to have Christmas Bedford back here.
I'm so happy. You'll have to see all the different ties I'll be working through for this one.
I can't wait. If that's not a tease, I don't know what is. We'll see you back here later this week, Bedford.
See you then.
Don't go anywhere. Dr. Peter McCullough will break down a disturbing recent study on a COVID-19 vaccine. Don't go anywhere. You have whiskey, and then you have premium whiskey, and then there's Fox and Odin. And once you take a sip, you'll see and taste the difference. Fox and Odin was created by a new generation of whiskey makers, and they're all about honoring the legacy of pre-prohibition whiskey, all the blending and finishing that goes into that. And they use only the finest ingredients to craft ultra premium whiskeys that are rich and complex and completely unforgettable. Now, they're rooted in Michigan. It's a place that's known for its beauty and its spirit of resilience. And Fox and Odin brings that passion to every bottle. Their whiskeys are crafted to celebrate the wild beauty that surrounds us every day. In this holiday season, pair their award-winning whiskey with your best moments, a cozy fire, a great meal, or the gifts that are right there under your tree. However you are going to celebrate, make it even better with Fox and Odin and their double gold award-winning craft American whiskey, where heritage and craftsmanship come together with every sip. You can buy it online at foxandodin.com. Use code America for free shipping. It's foxandodin, ODEN.com. Promo code America to get free shipping. American proud because they're American made. The countdown is on to January 20th, but there is still one very big question. Will we ever get an official investigation into the COVID-19 vaccines? The largest research study on the jab was recently republished after a successful peer review, and its findings are shocking. Here to break it all down for us is Dr. Peter McCullough. He's a renowned cardiologist and leading voice in the COVID-19 vaccine transparency. So, Dr. McCullough, in your medical opinion, how reliable is this study, and what can you tell us about it?
The study relied on autopsies that were done and actually were in the peer-reviewed literature. So they gave lots of details on the findings. All the data were extracted. They were put in to independent files and then independently adjudicated with knowledge now what we know the vaccines cause in terms of, their safety warnings. And what was determined is that about 74% of all the deaths that have occurred after vaccination that have come to autopsy, in fact, the vaccines caused the death.
So can you just break this down a little bit in terms of the context, right? And what people have been saying over the last few years. Shouldn't this shock people, or should they be surprised?
The peer-reviewed literature has now about 4,000 papers on fatal and non-fatal vaccines, disabilities, and deaths. So no, it's not a shock. The very first peer-reviewed publication of a man dying after the COVID-19 vaccine was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in the summer of 2021. And the FDA has in its warnings that the vaccines do cause heart damage or myocarditis. And I can tell you clinically as a cardiologist, myocarditis, its most common manifestation after vaccination is sudden death or cardiac arrest.
So when we look at the mRNA vaccines, where do they go from here? Do they have a future? Do you think that they get shut down at this point?
There are multiple calls to shut it down, that the platform is not safe, that none of the COVID-19 vaccines are safe for human use. The World Council for Health in the UK was the first to call for that. Now Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, Doctors for COVID Ethics. There are now literally dozens of calls for the vaccines to be removed. They're published in the peer-reviewed literature. So I expect they will be taken off the market. Largely, the crisis is closed at this point in time. We can treat residual cases. The vaccines never were compelling.
Do you think the censorship is stopping? I mean, my understanding is that this study was removed from preprints less than 24 hours before it posted. So this seems like it's an ongoing problem. It seems like there's more and more data, as you're saying, where this shouldn't be shocking, as you say, and yet we're still censoring information. So what's the path forward here?
The censorship in the medical literature is significant. It comes at the editorial reviewer and the publisher level. What's unprecedented are papers being fully published, contracted, copyrighted, indexed in the National Library of Medicine, and then having them be retracted for no specific reason. That violates the Committee on Publication Ethics guidelines. And that's what's so unprecedented about this. I'm the editor of a major journal, and I have been an editor of 2 major journals in the past. And I can tell you, it's my estimate that only 1% of these papers are fully getting through and being published, only 1%. So that 4,000 papers describing all these concerning side effects is just the tip of the iceberg. And what I'm seeing in daily practice now is a steady stream of those who have vaccine heart damage, blood clots, and disabilities, unfortunately.
We are getting closer to the Trump administration taking over. Give us your sense on what you've seen overall with the Trump cabinet picks so far.
Yeah, I can't comment on any of the physician picks because I'm a doctor myself, and that advice and consent process needs to go without any bias. Trump clearly is picking individuals that America has great aspirations for what's going to be done in these positions. I mean, let me give you some examples. Head of the FDA, people are looking for the COVID vaccines to be pulled off the market. Head of the National Institutes of Health, people in my circles want a ban on gain-of-function research done in the United States, so we don't have another deadly virus come out of a lab this time in America. For the CDC, people want the 1986 vaccine injury compensation liability shield to be lifted, the companies to be responsible for their products, and they want vaccine mandates for children to attend school or students in school or the military. They want all mandates for vaccines to be banned. That way people can just take vaccines for personal protection and based on their own risk-benefit equation instead of being forced into it.
It will be interesting to see what happens. There's a lot of hope and a lot of momentum and energy. One thing that I'm particularly interested in political science world is a little reconciliation or justice in terms of some of the things that have occurred, right, that we've all been complaining about over the last few years. Do you have any thought about accountability for those who were in charge of the COVID response and regime? I mean, is this something that you're concerned with?
I'm greatly concerned, and the 500-page plus report issued by Brad Wenstrup, the chair of the Coronavirus Select Subcommittee, while it found many problems with pandemic response, Americans are greatly disturbed with that report. But in that report, there is no call for special prosecutors. And people have pointed out that we should have a special prosecutor for crimes committed in the creation of SARS-CoV-2, a joint U.S.-Chinese collaboration, that there were crimes committed in the suppression of early treatment protocols to reduce hospitalization and death. Then lastly, crimes committed in the vaccine campaign, that we should have special prosecutors and name officially targets, subjects, and witnesses.
Well, Dr. Peter McCullough, thank you so much for coming on the show and making your Blaze News Tonight debut. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And Matthew, it's one of the things that people keep bringing up, right? This is something that people are so passionate about, a topic that people really are still very interested in because, like you said, the last question is accountability. Is it going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, Dr. McCullough's been obviously one of the leading voices on this, kind of came to the forefront in the last few years, both in terms of what needs to happen, right? What should be done in terms of changing policy. But what he just said at the end there is, I think, very important and very telling, that he thinks there should be a special prosecutor. That's the social media clip for the day for me.
That is absolutely true. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we'll unpack the fallout on the coup in Syria and what it means for Americans. Coming up. You know what's worse than coal in your stocking? Having imported meat in your fridge. And Santa wouldn't do that to the worst people on the naughty list, but the grocery stores do that to you every day. This year, Good Ranchers is making sure that you have the gift of meat that you can trust. During Good Ranchers Holiday Special, you can subscribe to any of their 100% American meat or wild-caught seafood boxes and get a 10-pound spiral-cut ham for free. You can buy it for yourself or check out their new gifting page, because a gift that nobody's going to turn down is going to be a box of quality steaks. This year, gift something that is a cut above the rest with GoodRanchers.com. They have the burgers and ribeyes and surf and turf and so much more. Good Ranchers has a gift box for everyone on your list, and it's delivered right to their door. There's no hassle or stress, and satisfaction is guaranteed. So remember, visit GoodRanchers.com, use my code Jill to claim your free spiral cut holiday ham before they run out. And if food you can trust this holiday season matters to you, then put down the car keys. Don't go to the grocery store. Go to GoodRanchers.com and use code Jill today for meat you can trust. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. Turkish-backed Islamist militants have taken control over Damascus after a 10-day offensive, forcing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to flee over to Russia. And last night, Joe Biden weighed in, calling it a fundamental act of justice. Here to break it all down for us is Kyle Seraphin, an FBI whistleblower and host of the Kyle Seraphin Show. So Kyle, we get Biden praising a coup in Syria. What should Americans be taking away from this right now?
Well, I like when he says it's a fundamental act of justice, because it just kind of tells you how little he knows about justice based on what he's done with his Justice Department. I actually don't always agree with Donald Trump, but when I do, I agree all the way. And the thing that he says is that this is a mess. It's not our fight. America shouldn't get involved. I'm wholeheartedly behind that. I've been talking to people that are analysts in this space and have been looking at what has been going on in the so-called Levant for at least the last 15 years. And it's ugly and it's a mess, and it has a lot of things that have very little to do with Americans at the end of the day. So I'm 100% behind that. Let's just kind of see what happens. There's a lot of interesting misinformation going on out there as well. We're seeing like all these information ops in real time. And we're also seeing kind of an interesting whitewash coming in from the mainstream media, which whenever we can dunk on them, we might as well. But seeing the way that CNN and NBC and ABC and others are covering this new leader stepping in, it kind of has these austere scholar vibes to me, going back to what they did with al-Baghdadi. And it turns out that this guy actually worked with al-Baghdadi back in 2011. So go figure.
Kyle, there's this meme, the Mad Men meme, where he's in front of the blank sheet of paper telling everyone a new idea that I saw today. And it was, okay, the Middle East, but we just don't do anything there. And I feel like a lot of Americans feel that way. I certainly do when I see that. What is the route forward ideally for Trump in dealing with Syria and the region as a whole? Do you have any larger picture that you want to see happen?
I actually like the meme. I think a lot of Americans, they feel both ways about what's going on in Israel. They feel sort of like sympathetic to people that are in Ukraine, but they also don't think that it's being fairly portrayed. So when you start looking at the way that Americans feel, which I think is why Donald Trump won, it's like, look, we got a lot of problems. We've got a lot of issues. We have people in this country that are inherently dangerous. We're going to probably have like real counterterrorism investigations from foreign terrorists that have made it over our border. And that's not going to happen until the border is shut, by the way. They've moved as many Trojan horses as possible. We don't need to go and fight terrorism overseas. We actually did that for about 20-something years, and we were doing pretty well right up until they pulled out of Afghanistan. And so this is just more of that legacy of Joe Biden's failure, sort of not understanding what's going on, showing weakness to the world and allowing conflicts. Like what happened in Syria seems to be pretty clearly the result of what happened with Russia and Ukraine. If you don't have Russia tied up in Ukraine, then you're not going to have the failure to back, because they had to pull a lot of their resources out of what was happening in Syria. We've got enemies there. The United States is actually fighting to hit 75 kinetic targets within the last 48 hours from what we can understand. So this is a problem, and it's something the United States military is going to deal with. But when it comes to like what Americans have the bandwidth to focus on, I think they want to see security at the border. They want to see an economy they can afford. They don't want to see oil prices go up, which just spiked 2% overnight because of this sort of unrest in the area. They want to see drilling. So we've got a million things happening domestically. And most Americans, if you went out there and asked them, like in your grocery store, hey, what do you think about what's going on in Syria? Either they don't know, or I promise you, they just don't care enough.
Yeah, Trump said this pretty well on Truth Social today when he basically said, it's a mess, but it's not our friend regarding Syria. The United States should have nothing to do with it. Let it play out. Don't get involved. One thing, though, that strikes me as a recurring theme, sadly, in the last few decades is that however our interventions worked, we've decimated, for whatever reason, the Christian communities in these countries. And
definitely,
there's mixed feelings on the part of many Christians there. And, you could see some terrible things potentially happening in the future to them because a lot of times these dictators will, in fact, keep them safe, right? It's why people go for dictators. Just keep the peace between all the factions. And then you pull out the leader and everyone starts killing each other. You have any thoughts about that, too? I mean, it's been, 20, 25 years, it feels like, of a slide for Christians in the Middle East, and they're not doing so well.
No, that's definitely the case. And it's not just in the Middle East. There's other places around the world as well where you have strong men that are basically kind of holding the status quo. This is another argument, I think, for peace through strength, right? We've seen a weakness of America in the foreign policy. We've seen an American president that is doddering and physically is not weak, but then also his policies are not particularly strong. He just walks out there and shows the world that we can be trod upon. And the people that are going to be victimized are always going to be the smallest minorities. It's funny that we always hear Democrats talk about the majorityism, and they want to talk about how to do democracy everywhere. Sometimes democracy is not appropriate. I think Americans in general are sort of worn out with the ability to care about so many things because there are atrocities that happen, and less of them happen when the U.S. is strong and projects strength, and people think that if they cross a line that we're going to have the bandwidth to go out there and stop them. But we've sort of lost, like you say, like that sort of ability to project that we're always the good guy in every place. We have enough coups under our belt that have not been positive. They have not worked out well. And it seems like whenever Americans go and mess in cultures that are very foreign to us, which is pretty common, we push on one thing and something pops out the other side that somebody else is going to pay for. And most of the time, there's just not media bandwidth for it. The one thing I will say that I've seen this mainstream media do, because I do a lot of a meta-analysis where I'm looking back and seeing like, what is the left excited about in this space? Because they do seem to be excited. They seem to be really excited about the possibility of getting some dirt on Tulsi Gabbard. That's kind of something I've seen recurring over and over again, whether it be from John Bolton or others. They're pushing out there and they're getting a lot of airtime on how are we going to dirty up Trump's cabinet picks, which once again just shows you sort of the disingenuous nature of the way that we're working right now.
Well, Kyle, I want to switch gears with you because there was a seemingly good guy in Daniel Penny. He was found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. And this goes all the way back to May of 2023. Penny restrained Jordan Neely. He was a 30-year-old man who had schizophrenia who was threatening passengers on a New York subway. So when you saw this, Kyle, what was your reaction? And does it feel like there's just a little common sense right now coming over America?
It's exactly that, right? So there's a couple of indications. I didn't expect that, by the way. If I was going to put money down, I would have said a New York jury convicts the guy because I don't have a lot of faith in New York juries. But thank God, and I mean that very specifically, people should be thanking God that this man is not going to be held criminally liable. He's still got a mess to deal with on the civil side. But we saw a couple things that indicate a little bit of a return to common sense. We saw Californians in November, they rejected a ballot measure to increase the minimum wage to like $18 or $19 an hour. They didn't want that. They increased the penalties for felonies in California, and by like a 70% majority, they said, let's make crime again in California. And then you see this jury verdict, which they don't seem necessarily associated, but in a broad sense, I feel like Americans are trying to say, look, we've given some of these things a test run, and they're objectively bad. It is really bad for men who are 24 years old, who serve the United States, who have a physical skill set to be able to restrain a guy that is openly screaming that he is going to kill people and go to jail for life. And then the other thing, which I don't even understand how they brought this case, but as someone who's been a paramedic for over a decade, and I spent a lot of time working emergency medicine, including in a law enforcement setting, they had cops show up on scene, and the guy, Jordan Neely, he not only had a pulse, but he was breathing when the cops got there. And what I didn't see on the body cam footage, which had to come out in the middle of the court case, was the proper response by the cops to render aid. So the fact that they're charging and trying to go after him in civil, why are they not going after the city of New York? You'd think that the city of New York would be the ones who'd be settling this big bill with the family who suddenly shows up, and they're very, very sad to have lost their kid. It seems like they may have failed him a long time ago, and probably also the system in New York failed him. So it's just another example of Americans kind of riding the ship very quietly, unexpectedly even, starting with November 5th and then moving forward. We're just seeing this kind of rationality slowly roll out, and it's really encouraging from where I sit. I'll just say that much.
It's a great point, Kyle. I mean, the autopsy report said inconclusive. I mean, it just boggles the mind what happened here. Real quick, what do you think about protests in the future because of this? I mean, it does seem like things have changed, right? This seems like a moment. But on the other hand, you have people saying, oh, no, we should be going out and tearing things up and all the rest because of this.
We saw a BLM activist holding press conferences. I had a buddy that was standing out in front of the courthouse the day before, and he's telling them, like nobody would care about black people if you switched the roles, then white people would be really mad. And I don't think that's true. I don't think people care in general about race. That's only because I grew up in almost a post-racial America before Obama. But we are hearing that call. It's going to be an interesting balancing act because the New York Police Department is enormous and they're highly capable and they deal with protests all the time. So the ability to go out and stop this thing, it's real. They sort of have shown an instinct not to do that in general, but right now we're seeing a Mayor Adams that's doing something that's kind of unexpected as well. He's kind of vying for a little bit of Donald Trump's attention in a positive way, isn't he? He's kind of tilting and saying, hey, we could go after some of these illegal immigrants and we could be part of your roundup and we could actually get on board with some of your border policies, which is the opposite of what he was saying a couple of years ago because he's under federal indictment right now. He might need to curry some favor with the incoming regime. So all of this stuff, it leads me to think that maybe people step out of line. But I think New Yorkers, if we can look at that jury as a indication of where the barometer has moved, they're probably also tired of this kind of stuff. I think people are kind of partied out from the 2020 and sort of the 2021 movement. And it's time to have a little bit of rationality and maybe worry about kids and maybe go to your job and stop worrying about trying to shut down streets and just be a jerk. So wouldn't it be nice if we saw a 2025 where we just kind of return to sanity? The thing they promised in 2021, we could actually get in 2025.
Let common sense reign again. Kyle Seraphin, always great catching up with you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Our next guest will expose the shady deal FEMA is offering North Carolina hurricane victims. You don't want to miss this. Well, like Kyle was saying, we've moved past the presidential election. And for us, that's a huge weight off of our shoulders. But it doesn't end here because BlazeTV is going to take this journey right alongside you. While mainstream news outlets twist the truth, BlazeTV is here. And we're going to be cutting through the noise and delivering facts to people like you and the Americans who love this country, who are ready to fight for what it stands for. We're not about to be controlled or silenced. And as we're heading into the next 4 years, our independent platform is now more important than it ever has been. So trust us, it's going to be a wild ride. We've already seen that so far. But if you're not a part of the Blaze TV family, now's the time to join. You'll get access to the honest political analysis, real perspective, and plenty of moments to laugh along the way. Blaze TV, we're not just a platform, we're a home for truth and your extended family. So let's take the adventure together. Go to blazetv.com/BNT and get $20 off. If you love the show, if you support what Blaze TV stands for, this is your chance to get even more involved in something special. It's blazetv.com/BNT for $20 off. People in North Carolina are still struggling to get by, and we'll continue to highlight their stories on this program. Watch Lee Thomas Brown explain the strange condition for government relief for homemakers.
North Carolina's emergency system has said they will do buyouts of houses impacted by Helene. Here's how the buyout works. You can get the money for your property based on pre-Helene values. Now, I did a whole video and an article in the Carolina Journal about this, so you know what questions to ask, and they will give you the money. Why will they give you the money for the buyout but not to stay in the house you want? Somebody's going to have to answer that for me. Well, I found out it's because if North Carolina buys you out of that house, they get reimbursed 75% of it from FEMA. Okay, so if FEMA can reimburse 75% of the buyout value and North Carolina has the money to do it right now, how come the homeowner can't have that money to stay put?
Here to break it all down for us is Matt Van Swol. He's the head of subscription growth for Wyze, and his wife, Erin Derham, and she's a documentary filmmaker. So Matt and Erin, thanks so much for joining us today. Can we just start with what the latest is in North Carolina and what people are still continuing to go through there?
Good. Yeah, I mean, people are still struggling. It's one of those things where we're inside our house, and we were fortunate where our house wasn't destroyed. But we drive down our street. Every bridge on the left side of our street is gone. There are trees everywhere. There's still destruction everywhere you look, trash and trees. So people are still struggling. Yeah,
That's just down the road.
Wow. So what do you make of this this FEMA stuff refusing to detail delivery plans? Why do you think they're failing to provide necessary aid?
Well, I mean, they're hiding their deliveries because their deliveries have been unbelievably slow. And we've been calling this out for weeks, and I know you guys have as well, where the first home that they actually delivered was in early November, and then we got an update weeks later that they had delivered 14, right? And now they're at 42, and people are like, that's way too long. And they have over 500 people approved for housing. But the weird part is we have no idea how many people actually requested housing. So FEMA says they've approved 500 people, and out of those, we know they've only delivered 42 homes. But we have no idea like how many people are waiting to be approved. We don't know that. And then on top of that, because they're getting shellacked for being so slow at what they're doing, they're like, all right, we're just not going to say anything anymore. And one of the reasons for that was over the Thanksgiving weekend, they told reporters that they were going to deliver up to a total of 100 homes for people for Thanksgiving. And we were all like, that's great. I hope you do that. And then it turned out that they had only delivered like 14 over that weekend. And they're like, weren't you supposed to deliver up to 100? And they're like, oh, sorry. And then they've just completely backed out of actually giving these numbers for home deliveries, which is crazy because that's an insane lack of transparency for even the people that are on the ground wanting to know, like, are people actually getting help? It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's a lack of transparency and also a complete lack of leadership that we have seen just overall. And I know J.D. Vance was in the area last Friday. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
I wanted to come down here for a few reasons. Number one, just my simple message to the people of Appalachia is that we haven't forgotten you. We love you. We want you to have the best Christmas that you possibly can have despite the circumstances. And I know that a lot of people in this neck of the woods feel left behind and forgotten. I just wanted to make them feel that their government leaders actually care about them, because we do. And certainly when this administration changes hands in the next 45 days, we're going to do everything that we can to help people rebuild, to get them back on their feet, to bring some commerce back to this area, but most importantly, to allow people to live in their homes and do what they need to do.
Now, Matt and Erin, I don't even know if you're voting for Donald Trump, if you don't care, but what do you look at in terms of at least the Trump administration coming in? Donald Trump has been there. J.D. Vance has been there. What do you hope to see in terms of disaster relief?
I just hope that they follow through with what they're saying. You know, we're pro anyone who is going to come here and help. We are pro. If you want to say amazing things, you better follow through because, you know, North Carolinians don't forget. So we expect action, and I feel the empathy and the earnestness from J.D. Vance, and I really, really appreciate that. So I have a lot of, you know, positive feelings about the direction that they are going with, specifically with helping WNC rebuild. We've put in calls to different organizations to talk through how not just to rebuild homes, but how to rebuild lives. North Carolinians are so proud, especially Western North Carolinians. They are some of the proudest people I've ever met, and I've traveled all over the world. They just want to work. They want to rebuild their own lives, and they want to do it with some integrity. So any politician that is willing to help us go in that direction, we are incredibly, incredibly grateful.
And what JD really gave me was a sense of hope and a sense of empathy that I feel like has been lacking from any communication from the government thus far. You know, you see FEMA coming on these press conferences and they're splitting hairs between what's a lightweight tent that people are living in and what's a canvas tent and which one has a wood stove. That's just a complete lack of empathy. We don't care what type of tent somebody is living in. We care, did you help them? Did you get them out of that tent? Are you truly working for the American people? And what I saw from JD was at least a message of hope that we're with you. And what I feel like is being spread by FEMA right now is no questions, we're doing a good job.
And just so much pride. We're doing such a good job. Look at how much we've done. It is such just a slap in the face to people who live here, who are seeing, people of every type of background in utter despair, and people like the true Americans who have lifted themselves up out of poverty over multi-generations of poverty and have gotten educations, gotten really incredible jobs, and now they've been left with nothing, and no one is here to help them. So it is just incredible to hear someone say, hey, I can see all of this devastation and we are going to help you. That is, wonderful.
Matt and Erin, I know that you guys have been out there and you're directly involved trying to get people help they need. Where should people go?
Well, Mercury Run has been awesome, and I know you guys are involved with that. JP Decker has been incredible.
Yeah. JP's great.
He's amazing.
Truly, every time I've called and said, I've got a woman that is in bad situation, I need her in a hotel tonight, he's like, give me the phone number. Like, same with a friend of mine who just lost everything. FEMA still hasn't responded in the past 2 months to his claims. JP sent me an email tonight saying, we're going to take care of him.
Just amazing. Samaritan's Purse has been on the ground. I've seen them everywhere. And then we are on the ground as well with Operation Shelter and Sean Hendricks. So we put someone up in an RV park this morning, actually.
And last night.
Yeah, and
last night's was a 2-week effort helped by Mercury One as well. That's so right. That one was a hard
special. That's great. And you know what? People there in that area are so lucky to have people like you on the ground that care to continue to tell this story. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. You.
Yeah, and Matt, it's one of those things that we talk about this all the time. We need to keep highlighting this story because the people there are not out of the woods yet. It's still extremely difficult on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think if you don't, you should follow Matt. People should follow him on Twitter and see, because they are telling the stories. We didn't quite have time for it today, but I'd love to hear from them more ideas about how to tell more stories, because right now, as they'll point out, there are not a hell of a lot of people from mainstream press there talking about everything from wildfires to people sleeping in tents. And, God bless them because they're trying to say this. And I hope that Blaze can do more. And I'm completely open to learn, more that we can just get out there so people don't lose sight of this story.
Yeah, I saw on Matt's Twitter profile, he was saying 73 days since Helene and 0 reporters from CNN have yet to come out there to Western North Carolina. We will continue to keep covering it here on Blaze, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back to wrap up the show right after this. Well, it was great to have Matt and Erin on the show from North Carolina. And if you want to go out there and support North Carolina this Christmas, we had Hillary Kennedy on the show back on Friday night. And Matt, she had an entire list of Christmas gifts, but she also had an area just to make sure to go out there and support North Carolinian businesses, because you can go ahead and buy online and have them shipped to your door, right? You don't need to go to the huge stores at this point in time. Pick a website where you can actually make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the stuff you're going to get anyway, you're going to get from somewhere. So why get it from some, faceless, whatever, corporation that brings it over from China? Why not go and you can find it on YouTube, just Hillary Kennedy's Christmas list with Blaze News Tonight, and go order from some of these businesses in North Carolina.
And I loved it because we had Chris Bedford back on the show today, and he had the entire Christmas setup behind him. He is ready for the season.
Yeah. Okay. So we are now officially in Advent. So I'm down. I'm cool with it. We're good, right? So we're not pre-Thanksgiving Christmas, false Christmas, I call it. But yes, it's real. Like, Bedford's in the spirit too. He's got a baby. He's got, he's got the Christmas stuff out, the Advent wreath in the background. It's pretty good stuff.
He's ready to go. We're ready to go. It is full on Christmas season around here. It might not be the best Christmas for Joni Ernst. I'm just going to throw that out there. If you're her family right now, you might want to be like, let's take it a little easy around her. Because I look at her about face that we saw with Pete Hegseth in her comments today. Will this be enough to save her? Because she's always one of those senators that's like, 50% conservative or less sometimes whenever you see those surveys come out.
So, my take on this is actually, I almost, I know it sounds terrible. I know there's going to be people in the comments going after me. I almost feel bad for her. You know why? Because most of these politicians, they just kind of sail in the breeze. They put out the sail. It's like they're on the.
Well, she's probably saying, I've gotten away with this so many other times before. Why is this time different?
They just go where the breeze takes them,
Yeah.
And so in this case, you get a lot of people who, nice people, some of them are nice people. And they just have no idea which way the wind is blowing. They don't know what's going on. So, I think she's in that situation where she lives in her bubble. She doesn't understand what's going on. And I hope that bad things, happen to her if she loses, if she doesn't go the right way. But she's someone who I could see, you could see her now coming around and maybe having some new revelations. And
well, they didn't know which way the wind was blowing before. I think they're aware of which way the wind is blowing now.
Well, then they need to evolve, and it's fine as long as they go the right way. I'm very.
She was out there. She had the photo shoot with Cash, and she had another one with Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, she's trying to go out there, and I'm friends. I'm friends with your friends. If you're friends with my friends, we can all be friends.
Look, I mean, okay. At the end of the day, we do need to get rid of them all and find people who actually understand what's going on. But I mean, look, if they go the right way, the milquetoast Republican is my favorite person in Congress. If you push them to go the right way, because they will, they'll all go the right way when they realize, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get anything I want this way.
I'm down for the chaos. Steve Deace has thrown his name in there potentially. I'm here for it. We'll be back here though tomorrow night.
Steve Deace for Senate. I'm down.